artist. He was around in 1790 and 1860, son of a Dublin portrait painter and of Scottish extraction. He's George Petrie. Is that in focus, Achill? And the thing about it is, it looks kind of a little bit up. I'm interested to know, is that Dugert? And I'm not going to say whether it is or not because that's confusing me there. But I'm not here to discuss this tonight. I just wanted to get through and show you the site. But it is of Achill, as you can see. And I believe John was saying he was a music composer. Music collector. But interesting, isn't it? Back that far. And of course we switch on to, we're moving to Alexander Williams, Toilers of the Sea, 1902, was sold for about 15 guineas back then. Alexander Williams, as you know, he was in the Skull Opera exhibition at the time, and because of his wonderful devotion to depicting the beauties of the Irish scenery and rugged coast of the West, he has brought many people to Achill to see the Minnon Cliffs. Born in Monaghan Town, a landscape painter and also an ornithologist, taxidermist, and of note and a professional singer, he used to exhibit in the RHA since 1873, many, many years up to his death. Formed a sketching club in Dublin, and also Blainaskill Lodge in 1899, and the cottage and gardens. It was the only surviving gardens on the island made before the First World War. Interesting, isn't it? That's the close-up of that particular scene there. I got a loan of this from the owner of this painting who lives on Achill, and you can also see self-explanatory, wonderful, wonderful cliffs of Minnon. And they've been knocked back a bit since then. They've been knocked back, well back, because I've painted and sketched them for years, and at that point it's been changed slightly. Lovely piece of work. I put these over here. Next we go to this wonderful man. Well, that's another one of Williams, by the way. I put it in just to give you something to think about. Look at that magical piece of work. He has everything in it, guys. Even the old huts for changing. Look. The boat, Billy Scott's that it is now, people on the beach, the horse and coming back, and the yawl or whatever it is, a yawl or a hooker. I'd say it's more a hooker because they were in Achill back then. And this is our friend. So when along the Achill Sound the summer sunset gleams, and when the heather bells are found beside the mountain streams, I'll seek thy shore and live once more, O island of my dreams. We're talking about Percy French. And you can see the second one there of the geese. And he did an awful lot for, I'd say for tourism, because all these people painted beautiful scenes, and they were responsible back then for bringing the tourists, making them aware of the wonders and the beauty of our area. By the way, I forgot to mention that Achill to me, I meant to say to John here, to me is like a child in a sweet shop. Or a toy shop. And what would I mean by that? But for an artist to go wild in the sweet shop or a toy, it's the same to me. When I came to Achill first, what did I see? Only beauty, beauty, beauty. When these people came, Nora Daly, I can't get you with the But one of the things I want to say is that really, when you think of it, it was rugged, it was beautiful, it was unspoiled. Achill had no blemishes. It was like the Garden of Eden. What happened? People came in and they wrecked it. Well, I don't mean that, I mean that with respect. Of course I mean it with respect. This is Cheska, by the way. Do you know who Cheska was? She was a great lady. Cheska, I had got her book, by the way. She was a great quail goer, and she was a wonderful, wonderful lady. George Russell did that, I think, by the looks of it. AE. George Russell was AE. Of course, he was painted by her as well. Cheska was in 1913, attended the Oireachtas in Galway. In 170 people attended, and of course, all the 1916 leaders and the whole lot were all there in the government and who lost the leader. She, by the way, was one of the first. She firstly designed the Scollachna banner, which you didn't know about, while she was in France attending the art school over there. And while she was there, she also painted that drawing as well while she was in France of the first painting school in Achill. Interesting, isn't it? And of course we go back through that, back to there, and you can see that cottage. I wonder, does anyone know where that is? She was also present at the first Scollachla meeting in 1913 to raise the banner. And the great thing about it that I heard from a little bird here in the front seat was that she was in this particular photograph and they didn't notice her for years. And they found that she was actually the lady in the photograph pulling up the banner that she had designed. Incidentally, pipe bands were played back then. Well, only pipes, not pipe bands. Pipes on the Strand in Kiel in 1913. Of course, they were played then in Achill. Just a bit of useless information too. And one of the comments I want to make here is, I got this right. I think it comes somewhere else here. I think I missed it. And when at last here it is here, my apologies. When at last we reached Achill, there was still the journey from Gubacurra to Dua. It was evening and getting cold, but for Cheska the views from the monastery to Kiel were enchanting, the mist rising in great waves up the side of Crowhorn, and the sun throwing an emerald colour on the grass. The air was filled with the scent of turf. Oh, it was beautiful, she wrote. The same night they went and saw the lights in the sky. My heart burned with a passion for Achill, or for Ireland for that matter. What a lovely thought. That's one of her drawings, and of course you have that. This was another, incidentally, look at that, that's Achill Sound. That's that Curran or Achill Sound hill leading over to Ballacroy at the back there. And this was Achill, this say Connemara. Of course it is Achill because of that shape there. We've all painted that. Magic, isn't it? Beautiful study. We move on to a guy that we all know now. Mr. Henry. If you just give me a moment, I want to have this right. Mr. Henry, this was one of the typical, I'm going to show only another slide, two slides of Paul Henry. That's one of his, here's these were classes down, because that was the horse with the beautiful shape of Minnon behind. And if this is what I'm concentrating on, this beautiful painting here, it was, of course, the Loch of the Tears of the Sorrowing Women, 1916-17. The title of this picture was suggested by Johnny Tom Owen McNamara. The painting is not typical of Henry, as you can see, and it was influenced by his contact with Whistler, who was another absolutely fantastic artist and used to suffer greatly from the poisons in the white paint that he used. I could have talked about the poisons in the paint all day, but I'm not going to bother you with that. There is a softness in the landscape here, with its heavy atmosphere mist and muted tones and limited palette, and that was typical Whistler. The story I want to tell you about, though, is not about Whistler, it's about two young boys in Achill during that time, growing up and enjoying the life of the beautiful area from the what they lived in. And when the first pipe band started in Kiel in 1946, the boys were so excited that they came home all enthused, wanting to get and to buy pipes. And the mother said, "What do you mean you want to buy pipes? Aren't they upstairs under the bed in a big treasure chest?" And the two young boys ran up all excited, and they opened the treasure chest. And what did they find inside? But a set of pipes, rare pipes I might add, and a lot of paints and brushes. Where did they come from? Johnny Tom Owen was the grandfather, and he approached Henry because he was very friendly with him at the time, and he suggested that he might give some paints to his son, John's dad, which he eventually, reluctantly, and eventually did apparently. And John found them and packed it in the box, and they were all over the place over these things. And that's history we're talking about. And of course the pipes, I believe, were the Pharaohs. So, very interesting story there, I thought. And we have that gentleman in the audience with us tonight. And we now go to, who's this lady? Grace Henry, the lady of the same man, Paul Henry. Look at the lovely work this lady painted. I saw her exhibition in Dublin about 30 years ago, and I thought it was magic, as I did Mamie Jellets and the others you will see in a moment. But I thought Grace Henry was an absolutely fantastic artist. Just look at that. Wonderful work. When God making you design something distant, shy yet kind, sudden, friendly without fear, like a robin perching near. He, I think, remote aloft, planned your voice so low and soft, just to hear the things you say, quaint and whimsical and gay. We all know where that is. I could eat that painting. And there's another one of her famous paintings. Do you notice anything about her work? Do I need to tell you? The atmosphere that she creates, the moods. And if you use your paints, you will create these moods. That's what an artist should do. An artist provokes with his colours, with his tones. That's what we're about, artists. And that's why I felt tonight that we should tell you all these things. Grace Henry's work. Look at that gorgeous portrait she did of a lady called Helen Waddell. And I believe, according to my wife, Nora, that she's the writer. You would know that, Margaret, which I don't know. She's a famous writer that was in the news this week. And that's back in 1930s. So that's Grace Henry. We're moving on. Are we doing all right in time, Paddy? This is a very famous lady, and a lovely story told about this lady is Mary Howard. Now, Mary Howard, I have two things here. I have a poem which was written by, in relation to Mary Howard's. And this is, it seems to be page. Something, please forgive me for a minute. Oh, I have the same old page. I have two pages here. I've confused the issue. That's okay. Right, here we are. I'll read the poem. It's Croghan Lake, Currymore. It is a solitary lake, surrounded by pearl-like stone. Its ripples are no more than 1,000 ebony scales under the sky's reflection. Within a wild circus, its life spreads throughout. The extinct crater is adorned with a green curtain, and the pale heather blows little clouds under the warm little bird. Underneath that, a visitor, the wind, a stranger, the sea. This came from a book in French, à la source d'Ara. This was the reason Mary Howard came to visit Achill. She came in search of a place called Ara. Ara, according to James White, was mentioned in a rare book, Ara la Touche d'Ara, which is an ancient holy place in literature and in a poem, High Brazil. The Belgian artist Mary Howard arrived by bus to Douai and went straight to Miss O'Flaherty's house. Miss O'Flaherty's, St. Coleman's as it was known, was a focal point for everyone in 1929. And the Belgian artist, both the ladies, by the way, Miss O'Flaherty and Mary Howard, spoke fluent French. Eve arranged a house for Mary at Gubmore in Douai and arranged for Annie McNulty to assist Mary Howard for the 3 or 4 summers with her equipment, easels and paints and what have you, which she did while she was on location. Annie was just 15 years old then and is alive today in her 90s and remembers it clearly. Mary, while she was here, painted Eve O'Flaherty's portrait in 1929, and this beautiful painting was one of hers of Clare Island, and none of us know where it is. It could be from Duiga, but it could be from Douai quite easily. And I'm leaving that up to you to decide. I thought it was a magical painting. Mary, by the way, was drawn to Achill to see this place, as said Dara, and she referred to Douai as that temple Douai. And she obviously had found her Ara. She returned for several years afterwards and stayed with Mrs. Buck. So that's a little bit of information. We have a lady in the audience here this evening, and I don't know whether she's a friend of Mary Howard. I wonder would she like to read the French poem for us? Would you like to?
Madam,
Would you like to read the poem for us in French? No, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's okay. I'm sure she'll see it.
Would you go up? Joe, would you go up?
Hello?
Can you bring her up?
Would you come up? Would you come up and read it? Please.
Good.
Is that going okay time-wise? Yeah. Are you enjoying it? Getting there. Thank you.
In French.
In French, please. Yes. You're very welcome.
C'est un lac solitaire, dans un terrier de pierre. Ses flots ne sont plus que 1000 écailles d'ébène sur le reflet du ciel. Dans un cirque sauvage, sa vie s'étale toute. Le cratère éteint, séparé de drap vert et la pâle bruyère, souffle des nuages gelés sous le tiède oiselé. Un visiteur, le vent a méconnu la mer, à la source d'Ara. 1929, Irlande, île d'Achill.
You are very kind. Now, Derry came to Achill in 1946 and stayed at the Pier Road again in Gulmore. We know he wore a bowling job, and you've heard all that from lecture before, and he was a friend of Mr. Flaherty. He was a friend of mine as well, by the way. And I found Derek to be a beautiful man. But just before I go into Derek, I just want to mention a bit of information I heard from another great friend of mine, John. In 1946 and 50, the directors of the National Gallery back then, and I still don't know his name properly, proposed that a folk gallery would be set up in Doha. This is just a bit of interesting news. In St. Coleman's, Mary Kilcoyne worked in it at the time during the summer, and they did manage to put an exhibition on, believe it or not, with people like Tom Ryan, and probably Derry Hill maybe as well, and Wilkes and a few others, but it only lasted, I think, for that short period of that summer. I'm not sure when it did or didn't open, but I have that from John, and I think it was interesting that it's running today, you know, it's Awachongi, but the thing is, it was wonderful, the thinking back then, and the number of artists that came and found Achill. We've got to remember we're talking about Achill all the time here. And why did they come, do you think, to Achill? Does anyone know? I'm sure you have your own thoughts. I have thousands of thoughts. But Achill has a spiritually, there's something, because I feel it every time I go and paint the same scene over in different places. And I still paint it totally different every time. And I find a different painting every time I move somewhere else in the landscape. So you people will probably don't see it, you're passing it every day, but to me it's like a gem, a jewel, most beautiful jewel. So poor old Derry Hill, he's a great character. He stayed at Mr. Flaherty's again. He was a frequent visitor there, painted regularly. He did many portraits of local people and used to ask the young people again, of course, to sit for him, but some of them used to run because their mothers and fathers said don't allow him to steal your image. Remember, we didn't talk about that. If you go back to the African people and all that, why those people in 45,000 years ago put the bison up on the walls and thought they could control them by painting them? There was fear, superstition. So the same thing went right through up to the 1940s with people that said they hid their faces from artists, but not all. One of the things Derek Hill, and this is where the artist comes in, Derek quoted from Constable, and he said, a good picture never needed a description. What is painted on canvas or drawn on paper is immediately visible to the naked eye. The various ingredients that go into a work of art, as I know and everyone else knows, are composition, colour, tone, texture and drawing, should be self-explanatory. And I'm going to finish off with just mentioning that Derry Hill and I met. We exhibited in this is, by the way, his Mary Miley, beautiful portrait of Mary Miley that Derek painted on Achill. This is the detail on it. I felt it was worth putting it up, if you can just read it for a moment. And that's the painting. Isn't she beautiful? That's John McHugh, who's young, what's his name? Young Geelty's granddad. You probably know. And that is one of Derek's earliest drawings or paintings when he came first of Minnon. Now it's very interesting, but it's most unusual. And these were his works. That's a little out of focus, is it, the table? That's in Ishkay, is it, I think, looking back at Slievemore. That's better at anyway. Towards Slievemore. Here we have a most unusual one of Achill Island from Gulmore. Lovely painting. And we're back to Hill Robert. One, before I finish, I must show you later in the slideshow that I'm nearly finished, by the way, look. That I had the pleasure of meeting Derek. I exhibited with him and several other artists from Achill and in our 26-man exhibition toured all over Ireland. Derek was one of the people, as was Tony O'Malley. And I met Derek on my trip to Tory Island when I was going with my lovely wife Nora with my paint box and off to paint. And Derek was on board the trawler going out. And of course he smiled at me and I smiled at him. I could see his box, his painter's box. And he had his tweed, his corduroy trousers and his tweed. And he said, lovely to meet you. And he was with a young woman. And I said, oh, you dirty old thing. You know, there he's at it, you know, with this young woman. Nothing wrong with it apparently, because today it seems to be the norm. And I'm qualified in a minute. We were invited up to his hut where he painted on the. Is my son given out back there? He painted at his hut on Tory, and he sat for me, and I painted him. So I'll show you the painting later. By the way, the woman that was with him was his niece. She was visiting from England, and we had a long chat, and I'm only just being funny. Just I thought I might knock a laugh out of you. This is, and Derek, by the way, a lovely man. This is Hilda Roberts. Who was Hilda Roberts? She was a lady who painted in Achill in 1929. She did an awful lot of paintings of young children, and there they are there. I think we found out that painting sold for 10,000 in 2006. Do you recognise anyone in it? Yeah. Absolutely beautiful painting. I have only the one painting of hers. But it was interesting too. She was from, and I'm not going to stay too long, it's 1921. She painted beautifully and exhibited in the Dublin Gallery of Art. And I think that sold, as I said, for about 10,000. She married a gentleman out of the Newtown School in Waterford, and I know this for a fact, she started the first art school in Waterford back then. So what people were doing, she actually slipped in and out of Achill quietly, didn't she?
Where is that painting now, Joe?
We have the details in the book. We've the painting in the book. This is, by the way, this is a window in Corran Church. Wilhelmina Geddes, 1888 to 1995, County Leitrim. 1910, Sarah Purser invited Wilhelmina to join her stained glass studio in Antour-Glenna. She attended William Orpin's summer classes as well. She also taught Evie Hone, which I'll be showing a slide of. Evie Hone and Louis Librocky came to visit Derek Hill while he was on Achill, by the way. Evie was friendly with Ernie O'Malley. Is it Ernie O'Malley from Achill Lodge? And of course we all know that John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara plus Graham Greene came to Sharkfish. I know that John Wayne made the statement that Achill was the highlight and is the nicest place he had ever visited. John Wayne made that statement. You might say, why is that? Well, Achill is very important. But John Wayne found it the best place he had ever been in, he said. I have the quotation on the computer if you want to read it. This lady, the Irish Times said when she died in 1955, she was one of the greatest stained glass artists of her time. The window was designed by Wilhelmina and presented to the church in Corran, bequeathed by Emily Wedall, co-founder of Scollagh, and installed in 1957. We now move on to a man you all know, and I'm just staying very, very short time on him. Is the American Robert Henry, 1913, visited Achill, returned annually between 24 and 28 to Corrymore House, painted hundreds of portraits of Achill people, especially children, and you all know the story about him because he's been covered by Tommy and several other people before this. This is a particular lady that I'm very fond of, and you can see it's not her I'm fond of, but her friend, the painter, Minnie Jellish. Look at this wonderful work. I had the pleasure of seeing this lady's work in Dublin. You talk about Roderick O'Connor and you talk about Orpin and all the people. She painted equally, if not better than the rest of them. This was her normal style of painting. I'm not showing you all her works, I'm just showing you a couple that I have here tonight. But what I'm going to talk to you about is her visit to Achill. She went into Cubism. Look at her wonderful, she went from there right through these patterns of the grid and eventually started to develop the Cubist approach in her thinking. She, when Evie Home went off to France and did her thing with several people over there. In 1897 and 1994, Mamie Jellett visited Achill. It was in relation to an agricultural project in Scotland and was inspired to create her Achill horses. While there, visiting the island, the treatment of the Achill horses theme, 129, there's two paintings here that I'm referring to. The paint was applied in a most fluid manner with a soft gradation of tone and colour of the horses. The horses are galloping through the sea and the curving forms and the waves underline the entire composition. You can see how she was beginning to go into shapes, curves and squares, as Picasso and several others did. They took angular shapes and everything to develop these not ordinary paintings taken and moving them to another stage, which sometimes can be very hard for people to understand. This was a rare piece here because I don't think a lot of people have seen this. That's looking back from our gallery at Croagh Patrick. And this is the piece of land out there that you're looking at through, if you look sideways when you go out, you'll see that view there, and that's Mulranny in there in the corner, and over here are the Ballycroy Hills. But this is that headland, that landscape out there, and that was one of Maney's as well. Another one of Maney's, the bog. Rather interesting. Look at that for the way she treats the colour. Tones are very, very kept to the simple siennas and burnt. But look at the way she has angled everything. Look, beautiful work. That's how she saw the bog. Here we have Evie Hone. I'm just putting Evie in because, in fairness, I haven't anything on Evie. As I just said, she visited with Labrocky to Daly and Achill, and that's, as it says there, St. Bridget, the stained glass. She was very famous, and of course Daly was very instrumental in helping her get commissions in England, because he was a very influential man. He knew the kings and queens and all these people. He even knew Judy Huminiman, who was a local fisherman in Donegal. He wasn't, he was a local fisherman in Donegal. Oh, he was a violin. Oh, that's right. I only said that because when that was the story, was he was supposed to be Huminiman. Oh, he named the violin. Who's this lady? Another wonderful lady, RHA, 40-year period. This is Lillian Davidson, RHA, 1879 to 1954. Am I running over time, Dr. Penny? Yes. Exceptionally talented artist from Dublin, capturing fleeting moments in nature and water and sky. And the paintings I'm showing you are the boatman, the turf cart, the Holy Well, all of Achill, and her last one, the turf stacks of Dual. Right. We move on to Sarah Purser. That speaks for itself. Here we have Letitia Hamilton. I'm going quick now. You have Evie Hamilton here. Letitia Hamilton, that's Bunnacurry, I'd say. And you have again Pullen. And you have, lastly but least, down in Dua, looking up the road to. And that's Evie, that's her sister again. Here we have Mabel Young. Of course, she married Paul Henry, you all know that. He ran off with her after going back to Dublin. Some of these people had very sad life stories. They were lonely and they were depressed and they found it hard to survive back in the 50s and 60s and 40s. No money, and stayed in old little apartments in Dublin. Very sad. Grace Henry died on her own. Paul married Mabel Young, but that's her work of looking back again towards, I think, the Ballycroy Hills. Here we have Dorothy Blackham, a person here tonight owns that. Isn't that a lovely painting? We're getting close to it now. Here we have a friend of ours from Westport. He's Owen Walsh, and this is Owen. He's a beautiful painter. I was at his exhibitions and know his family very well myself. And this is his Bunnacurry. Look at his style. He was beautiful and wild and vivid with his colours. Here we have a Desmond Turner, who sadly is gone as well from us. And Desmond painted the usual like this, the old Desmond Turner sense. And this painting is owned by the lady of the house here. And we're delighted to have it. And that's one rare piece that you've seen of Desmond Turner's. We move on to a great old friend of mine, Amy McNally. And Amy used to come to our gallery in Duiga and talk to us, and that's a house in Dewat that we all know. And she, one of our people here owns that painting. And Amy, I remember, I'll never forget Amy, and it was the other lady, your friend Alex, with the silk screens. No, the lady that lived over near the deserted village. June. She, both herself and Amy were in my gallery and they said, you will come and visit us in the winter, won't you? We must talk about painting. We never got to meet, but the point is that was her comment to me. I remember going out the door of the gallery and saying, won't you? It's a very lonely time in Achill in the winter. That was what artists have to do. She was actually inviting me, Martin, over to talk about the paints. But I'm saying it was true because artists have quite a lonely old time, you mightn't realise it. This, of course, is our own premier artist from Achill. I'll give you a guess who that is. And that is our own Camille Souter. I'm just including her because she's a friend of mine and I have a painting, a sketch done of her, and I'll show you that in a moment. And I've just got one artist to cover before we go now. We're going to go into her now here, celebrating the life, and this is the last artist of Doris McCarthy. That's the book that Doris gave me and Nora as a present, and there's quite a massive amount of stuff in it. She painted all over the world. This is her getting the Order of Canada. The great thing about Doris was that she came and painted here in Achill in 1955 first, and she came back to us here to the gallery and our studio and painted with us for a full month in 1999 and in 2005. This was her friend Wendy, who owned the Jasper and Whistler galleries, and while they were on site painting with us, they telexed through the machines back to the Jasper galleries their paintings every day, because they were showing the works they were doing in Ireland. And she did this over 3 years. This is her painting in 1955 of Minnow and Cliff. They're primitive in their style, but her works go on in so many different styles. Newfoundland, painted in all over the world. This is behind our gallery. There's the hills that we're looking out our windows at, and this is our scene here from our gallery. Okay? And this was her bog scene back in 1951 of Achill, low tide. 1951. Famous lady. She gave her estates to the Canadian government in Toronto. She had galleries opened in universities and in hospital wings. She was a very famous lady. And here we have something Croft, County Mayo. Could be in Duiga or anywhere like that. And here she is with himself and herself sitting at the old easel before we added on our studio below, the outer studio. And that's Wendy. She was one of her chaperones. She had ladies with her back. She died at 100 years of age. So back when she was 50 years of age, she had a chaperone with her for 30 years. Wendy came along then as a pupil and went with her everywhere all over on her painting trips. But sold her work in her 2 galleries. She was exclusive to her. Here's my drawing of her. Okay? That's my drawing of Doris. She actually took one of my sketches, but she didn't give me back one of hers, but she did give me a sign, a few things there. This is my painting of Derek Hill, of Derek as he sat for me in Tory. Beautiful guy, wonderful talented man. This is my sketch of Camille Souter in 85, and she countersigned the sketch herself. Camille Souter. And last but not least, this is my old friend at the Bowl House. I went to visit him at the Bowl House. That's Tony O'Malley. I was friendly with Tony because if you look up there in the corner, you'll see Tony and his cousin, Michael Joe, sitting there. And I knew Tony personally, but that was him when he was with Jane. And you can see the scribbles I made on it. That's meant to be me, but don't mind that. That was after the glass of wine. And here is a very, very famous man called Johnny Tom Owen McNamara. And you can see the hill in the background and the cottages and the houses. And wait a second, is that gone, Achill? Yeah, so stay there. And I'm finished my talk except to say that I just have something of Doris McCarthy's that my wife told me not to bring out. That was the palette. That was the palette that she used in my studio, and she signed it with Wendy and the other lady. And I won't read what's on it because it's very simple, but with lots of love from it. You've got a heaven here, she said, a magic place. And just a little snippet from her personal cards, what she said, and what one reporter wrote. And we over time, Edward. We're finished now.
Oh, 2 hours.
I'll just mention that she made a point that in the report it said she was packing up to go to Ireland to spend a month in Achill with us in this news. So I've only one job to do before I thank you all for being so patient. I'm going to ask a particular gentleman in the audience to step up and receive this painting or this drawing that I did of his grandfather. I think you'll see, John, that since I spoke to you last, I've added all the bits that I didn't put in. I want to say something with John McNamara. He is what I would say the epitome. He is the man of Achill. Sean McNamara, far ionach spiridolce, gaeilge canu agus ceol, cultúr, gach rud, an thinking sibh, agus tá gro mór agam faoin fear seo, agus a clán. And since I met him, I've been so impressed, not because I'm not impressed with Pat Conway and our friendship and our golf, everybody, but John especially, because when I did the drawings of the Scalachlin children back then, he encouraged me along to do it. I'm not going to say too much more about him, but such a wonderful man, what he has done for the Ceol in our area, and Paddy Lillian got into the chair. I was chairman of Scalachlin, Paddy became chairman of the writers, and John became the chairman of the music, and between the three of us we battled along and we all ran the whole thing with no problem and no talk. And I wish some of days that we could go back to those wonderful days. So I'd like to present John with this token from my family personally. A little surprise.
You're doing the rudder break on show. On a now we have the show so agus will can go more shot on the green graphene. We have many photographs, but when you have the work of an artist, it's something that's so special. And I'm very grateful to Joseph for all that. And to compliment him while I'm here on this wonderful lecture that he gave us here tonight, or talk, or took us through the whole scene, and I suppose consolidated for all of us the importance of art in Achill and what it means and what it will continue to mean.
Yeah.
So enough with the club.
I'd like on behalf of the Achill Historical Society to compliment and thank Joe Daly for a tour de force this evening. Even though Nora had put the reins on him tonight, he got the message very, very clearly across and gave us a wonderful kaleidoscope of the visual arts in Achill, from the first artist who came here, Alexander Williams, to the present day of Camille Souter. And it was really fascinating, and also the background, the history of going back to 2500 BC, the Egyptians and the styles and the Renaissance and the different pigments. I mean, you got through an enormous amount of material, but you delivered it with great humour and you kept our attention. Nobody snored, and it was wonderful that We had the link with Maria Howie,
Yes.
with Madame Micheline Latini this evening, who just arrived in time, and also the link with John Twyn and
Yes.
his grandfather and Paul Henry. So it's been a wonderful closure of the circle, as
Yes,
it were,
indeed.
and maybe the start of a new era in painting in Achill. Achill will always attract artists. It has just a magic quality, magic light, and despite, as Joe said, all the people who come in and build houses here, there's still lots of beauty left here, and it still inspires. So thank you all for coming here this evening, and thank Joe and Nora for welcoming us into their wonderful house, and feel free to look at Joe's art around the walls, and there's a glass of wine for everybody,
Okay, thank you.
and so relax and meet everybody. And thank you for coming.